If I'm not talking loud enough, let me know. I lost my voice earlier this week because it's springtime, which means pollen, and I know everybody's always like, oh, the pollen's the worst possible in the world, exactly where we live. I dare any of you to move to Jefferson County and not like just chew Zyrtec like their tongues. So my apologies if I lose my voice. But as Sierra mentioned, yes, I got my start in libraries here in Kenton County, and you know, Regional History Day, it's important to do something like that because Kentucky is such a regional state and the history of the different areas can be so unique and different and wonderful. But I'm also going to talk about cemeteries all over the state, but a lot of champion how wonderful the built environment is here, how wonderful the cemeteries are, and how fantastic the Kenton County Public Library is for genealogists, local historians. Having worked there in the Cincinnati Public Library and now in Louisville, you have an incredible department, an incredible staff, great collection, so you're gonna hear me ramble on about how much I love this library multiple times. So let's get into it. I dig graves. Not literally, it's more like, you know, Hepcat, cool daddy-o, I dig it. But, you know, it sounds kind of spooky too, and you might kind of get that inclination from me just a smidge. So I like to go to cemeteries all over the place, the state, the country. I haven't been out of the country yet, that would be very cool. But I also really enjoy maps and pinning things and figuring out, ooh, where do I need to go next? And one of my goals is to visit a cemetery in all 120 counties. So I've been way out here in Bubble Land. Is anybody familiar with the Kentucky exclaves that exist as a result of the changing patterns of the river? It's like, if you have, like Henderson has another right across from it. You have to leave Kentucky, cross the Ohio River, feel like you're in Indiana, but there's a racetrack there. And over here in Fulton, there's a big bend in the river too. And of course, there's a cemetery there. So that's one of the wonderful things about doing this is you learn about history, you learn about community, you learn about art. And it's from people who you don't even have to talk to if you don't feel so inclined, which I think is lovely. So yeah, again, I really enjoyed doing this. I like to put things on a map. If you want to see where all I've been and where I'm going, etc., there's a URL. At the end of the presentation, you can get to this. There's a bigger, easier one to read. I don't do handouts because it's more stuff to worry about. But let's get into it. So Kentucky has, of course, lots of different kinds of resting places. We have cemeteries, veteran cemeteries, there are memorial gardens, family plots, so on and so forth. And when you go from one place to another, you start to learn kind of visually what different places are going to be like based on their culture, based on religious inclinations of the area. But I think it's a really wonderful way to learn about your region, your state, etc. But these are the different kinds of spots you're generally going to see, less so with natural and green burial grounds. Those are newer kind of concepts. And zoning doesn't always like them very much, so those are probably we're going to see more of those in the future. You will notice though, I don't go to a lot of memorial gardens. Would anybody be able to guess why? Because I love headstones, and they're usually flat lawn markers, so I will kind of skip over on those sometimes. We didn't hear that. And when you're going to all of these different places and seeing all the different stones, memorials, markers, you learn all the different types, what all they mean. And I'm an architecture fan, so I love like learning all the minutia and the weird words of what all the little pieces are. But so for those of you out there who enjoy that too, here's a list of some words where you can impress your friends and family to be like, yes, I see that slant marker is very beautiful, but do you like the bevel on it? Materials, those can change by the region too, depending upon what stone you have underneath you or what you have regionally too. One of the wonderful things about headstones in northern Kentucky, you have access to the river, commerce over the years. There's sandstone that has really tiny particles that have lasted wonderfully over the years. And we don't have that the farther down the river you go. So there are headstones here that are much better preserved simply by virtue of the kind of stone they are. All right, so when I'm looking for a place to go, what do? Well, I'm sure a number of you are genealogists, so you know about how to find where your families are buried. You look at death records, you look at church records. But what if you don't know if it doesn't matter if the person who's buried there or what you're looking for, if there's anybody related to you. I like to use, anybody know what kind of map this is? What kind is it? Yes, thank you, wonderful. Does everybody know about the USGS Historic Maps database online? Or the wonderful wooden cabinet that is in Covington with the maps that you can pull out? Those are great for finding spots that are kind of hard to find now, so if you go on, Google Earth, that's great. They might not have all of these little pinpoints that someone made in the 40s and the 50s, because whether it be it's grown up a lot, or maybe something had to be moved because of construction, what have you, these maps are great for that purpose. And also, people who like to do fishing. I think in Covington we had fishermen who like to use them a lot too. But then there's good old Google Earth as well, reference books, just all kinds of different records depending on what you're looking for. One of my favorite things to talk about with headstones is iconography. Is anyone familiar with this book, Stories in Stone, a field guide? It's great. It's not new. It's been printed in the last, I guess, 15, 20 years, but it's wonderful for, it's a nice little format. You can go out, find all kinds of different images on headstones and learn what they mean. It also has a nice list of different maybe like orders, like what does IOOF mean? Thank you, exactly. And different organizations, that kind of thing.
What does it mean? I didn't hear it.
It's the Odd Fellows. So if you see IOOF, the person who's buried there was an Odd Fellow. So
The traditional order of
exactly, for a full version. Whoop. All right, so trees and logs. These are fun because you get, as I mentioned before, these tiny itty-bitty little leaves that you can see really, really well if something has been carved in sandstone. So we have Flemingsburg, Fleming County, that's kind of regional to here for sure. A little farther out, where I actually have family buried, in Meade County, farther down the river, you don't see the same kind of sandstone headstones. They're more likely made out of limestone, other different kinds of rocks that, don't last the way they do because the particles are different sizes. I won't talk about geology too much. But the weeping willow, does anybody know what that means or what it stands for? Yes?
It's weeping, it's mourning.
Exactly. And that's one fun thing about a lot of the different iconography. Sometimes it's pretty literal, and if you're looking for a deeper meaning, it's not really there, but exactly, it's weeping, it's mourning. There's also connection to mythology in there as well. And the trees, the popularity of those definitely happened kind of pre-Civil War, changed over time, and we'll see that as we see the different dates on the headstones, but some are a little bit later too. Now these are different. These are a little bit later than the others. Definitely related to the Victorian artistic pastiche at the time, I guess we'll say. But not only do you have these more realistic looking logs, and I love it when people are like, oh my gosh, there is a headstone at the cemetery. It's a tree, I know it's a tree. I'm like, well, it's a really well carved tree. It's not an actual, like, petrified tree. But I like that this one says graves on it.
Yeah.
All right, more trees and logs. This one has a little hourglass at the top, which is nice. It means if the hourglass, tempest fugit, time flies, sometimes you'll see little wings on them. Another image for mortality, fleeting existence, etc. We've got more stacks of logs, lots and lots of different kinds of ways you can express mortality. Broken branch, oak leaves, those are often for graves of people who've lived a long time, like a strong, steady oak tree. And then, even more fun with logs. So, yeah, a tiny little log cabin. This is the only outlier of everything that's in the presentation. They're all Kentucky headstones, cemeteries. This one is in Colorado. So that was pretty cool to see something so similar elsewhere. And like so many other things, we used to be able to order houses, we could order headstones. It's those who love rustic art and monumental work. So another opportunity to open up the Sears catalog and order something very practical for yourself. Oops. All right, plants. So speaking of different kinds of materials that headstones are made out of, is anyone familiar with the metal headstones they're called white bronze or zinc? They're sort of a bluish color, you might see them. They have lots and lots of interesting iconography because they were mass produced by a few different companies, one out of, I think it was Bridgeport, Connecticut. They had another location in Detroit, and you'll usually see a little thing at the bottom that says where they came from. But again, you could shop through a catalog, pick your icon of choosing. I thought the corn was interesting because corn is one of the images in the field guide that I had never seen before, and one day in Paris Cemetery, there it was, corn on the headstone. But you can also see these little bolts. So you would pick your general standard shape, and then you decide what imagery you wanted, if any, and they would just bolt on the different pieces. The kind of unfortunate thing is sometimes those fail, sometimes there will be a hole, various other things. You're like, oh, it's a cheaper, different way of memorializing yourself, but materials like that don't last quite like some different types of stones do. And of course, we've got wheat at the end. Again, another image of a long, well-lived life, ferns, and I'm guessing most of you probably know what the broken flowers generally mean, especially if it's a little bud. It's typically the grave of a child. You see that with lambs a lot too. So here's one in Owenton, just the smallest little thing. It looks really big from the angle. We have a passion flower. This is on the grave of the Von Gundy family, who I can talk about for a really long time. The last time I presented in this room, I think I was talking about them. Sorry, the allergies. And then, let's see, what else do we have? Here are the animals. So another very standard image you see for children. You see lambs, you see broken buds, and there are lots of other things. Bees, they have a few different meanings. Sometimes they're related to women's graves for being involved in the female support version of social organization, and sometimes pets. This one's a lot of fun. So sometimes you're just out enjoying the art, enjoying the space, and then one will kind of jump out at you and go, huh, why does this grave have a big dog on it? So naturally, you run to Google, you run to Ancestry, you start looking things up, and this particular grave in Mount Sterling is the grave of a gentleman who bred different kinds of dogs. So rather than just having a death date, a birth date, and you can kind of see the dog's name, his name is Red, and we know he's an odd fellow because he has the 3 link change with the friendship, love, and truth. But if you want to learn more about the puppies he would like to send, they are fine and splendid, etc. There's nothing like the superlative terminologies they like to use at the time. Hands. These, one of my favorite hand piece of funerary or grave art I've seen is actually Sierra. Are you still in here? Sierra? Mm-hmm. The hand you had of the grave in, or the picture you have of the grave in Nebraska with the hand that's trying to point up with the wrong finger, I've still yet to see that in Kentucky. So the artist carved the wrong one, so that's a fun one. I've not seen that elsewhere, but you see hands used in different ways. This is kind of a matrimonial. You can see the different cuffs on their clothing. Like one's more masculine, one's more feminine. Pointing up, as in saying hopefully. Or there's also the pointing down with a broken chain. Another one of those kind of remember, memento mori, you too will break the chains of life. There is rest with a flower, more pointing up. And I really like this one. This is on an Oddfellows headstone too. The organizations. So We've got, see, Cave Hill. This one has a lot going on. And from here we can figure out pretty much, oh, you know what this means, Shirley? Anybody?
Mason.
Exactly. So, and over here we have, on the far right, is it? I thought it was the Knights of Columbus. I forgot. But a lot of times with organizations too, and I don't know, did I go over the Woodsmen of the World back a little bit in the logs? Oh no, did I take it out? Well, if you see a headstone shaped like a log, and, oh, maybe it's after that. Here we go. The Woodsmen of the World. So they were an organization that you could join, and they still exist today. As a member, you were entitled to receive a headstone, which you will see when you go out to look now, that if you find that, not every log headstone is a person who was part of that organization, but it will say it on there if it is. And again, there's the Oddfellows. We have the FL&T chain. Sometimes you'll just see that. You'll see the eye with the light, or the kind of rays pointing down. Though I will say the Oddfellows and the Masons use a lot of the same kind of iconography. Different faiths are represented too, sometimes in ways you would find surprising. So when you think of Kentucky history, not everybody necessarily thinks of all of the Jewish communities that existed in different towns along the river. This is from Henderson. We have lots of them in Louisville too. I like that going to cemeteries, not only can you visit extinct communities physically, maybe there used to be a town there, now there isn't, also cultural ones too. And then again, this is another zinc white bronze piece that you could order out of the catalog. These are my favorites. Someone decided, well, I need a headstone. What am I gonna put on it? Another headstone. So anytime I find these, they are the most exciting to me because obelisks, more obelisks. Well, I can't afford one. Let's just put one on the little one. And then there's also kind of a tomb down here. These you see also, they're a little bit older typically, again with the sandstone. More than likely, I would guess that this headstone is older than this one, but look how much more detailed it still is just because we've got, more than likely, I think this one's marble, which a lot of us learned watching HGTV. You never put marble countertops in your kitchen because even lemon juice can destroy them. So proof in headstones too. And then assorted symbols. I feel like I see these around the kind of Louisville metro area more than other places. The extinguished torches, again, pretty obvious symbolism there. The urns were what a lot of times they used to symbolize mortality before the willow tree. There's kind of an evolution of early on, you see on the East Coast, the Puritans with their very cool headstones with literal skulls on them because they didn't want to get too fancy schmancy with any allegory, but that slowly evolved into other kinds of depictions that were influenced by Greek, Roman mythology. And my favorite, homemade. I think these are wonderful. Somebody loved Shirley so much, they went out, they bought concrete, and they drew a dolphin in the concrete with some wonderful seagulls in the ocean, because my guess is Shirley probably loved dolphins. And what is a better expression of someone's life than somebody doing that for you? And then you have more simple ones with paint, other different kinds of mixed media too. And then there are the more elaborate homemade ones. This one's really cool. It's not too far away in Grant County. I found it and I was just like, wow, somebody went to the garden section and went wild. And then this one is wood, metal, a lot of different pieces. It's quite big. It's probably about that wide, tucked up near some trees. I usually don't get too many ticks on me. That was a different day, but it was a really cool one and worth it. More homemade, and again, there are all kinds of stories you can find that you might not know about or find otherwise. Here's another homemade kind of collection of different things. We have wood, we have a statue, kind of like garden ornaments. But take the name, go to ProQuest, and if you don't know about that yet, please find out. That's where you can get a lot of cool historical newspapers, depending upon what library you're at. And then the death record to say, yep, well, I know I was there, but is there any further information? So this person actually died of a gunshot wound, and there's the newspaper article as well. Oh, more homemade. And sometimes I like that they were like, well, I forgot the R. Let's put it in there anyway. That to me says so much more about like the person and everything than something like unexpected. Yeah, I love it. Of course, epitaphs, not everybody has one. Sometimes they're pretty generic. Other times they really pique my interest. So I found this one. It was in Ryder Cemetery. It was kind of at the top. Occasionally, too, you'll actually see a carving where the headstone itself was carved or the artist's name. So this is on one side, that's on another side. And then there's this. Can everybody read that or see it? I can read it too. The most interesting part, so this is Susan. Susan was the daughter of the Shuck family. She married a fellow whose last name was Thomas. She was born August 24th of 1840. She was married February 21st of 1859 and died at 2 o'clock that same night from accidental burning at 11 o'clock that morning. So this was 1859, and there is a Courier Journal article that explained exactly what happened. It is pretty tragic. They gave her a pretty nice memorial. Yeah. And not only, I haven't found her sister's grave, her sister was also burned too, but yeah, that's quite a wedding day. But there's the dark, sad, romantic part at the end. The bride was badly burned from the waist up, her hair burned from her head. After her wounds were dressed, and while she lay upon her couch, suffering in intense agony, the marriage ceremony was performed.
Oh.
A few more homemade. I think this slide got lost, but these are fun to look at too. And fieldstones. Fieldstones, you wouldn't necessarily think, oh, look, there's a headstone. That's the kind of charm about them. It would just be a stone. Someone would sit somewhere to mark the location of a burial. Most folks don't have headstones, which is a piece of information that new genealogists learn the hard way, I think, because they're like, well, everybody has a headstone, right? I should be able to go find them. Like, well, let's look at some cemetery records, and if you're standing in the right spot, or roughly thereabouts, and there's not one, they don't have one. They may have potentially had a fieldstone at one time. Not everybody gets those either, but if you're just walking around, you see a random rock, don't touch it. And of course, when you go from place to place, county to county, you see a lot of the same things over and over again, but usually not quite this detailed. I started running into these probably about 3 or 4 years ago. All of this started because I wanted to go to cemeteries I hadn't been to in the area. I came from a different part of the state, and working in local history and genealogy, a lot of you folks wanted my help to figure out where the cemetery was that you were going to go to visit your relatives. And I couldn't tell you because I didn't have anybody buried here. I had no idea. So in October of 2017, I went to 31 cemeteries in 31 days and thought, well, this was fun. I learned a lot about the community. I'm going to try to go to 100 that I've never been to every year. So that's kind of where this took off. But I was really surprised to see something like this in so many different places. Not only, it seemed very peculiar, like what does it mean? I see all kinds of imagery. I see a broken wheel. I see a cistern. Here's where they were in different places. Ivy, broken pitcher, just a lot of detail, but they weren't identical. So I was like, that's interesting. I don't know what's going on here. Well, if I had bothered to read what one of them said, the closer, I was like, well, maybe I should actually read what that said. It's literally referring to a Bible verse that talks about each one of those pieces that are in the headstone. And down here we have J.S. Clark and Company, Louisville, Kentucky. But, as you can kind of tell, some have been reset. I'm guessing this is probably the original that it came on. and occasionally other like pieces will miss or go missing, like the element that tells you where it was carved. And then since then, because this came from another presentation I've done, I found another one, which really surprised me, because can anyone see the writing down here at the bottom? It's in Hebrew, exactly, yeah. So I was like, oh, okay, well, that's really cool. It's in all different parts of the state, kind of around the Lexington area, even though they were carved in Louisville, and there's also representation of it in a Jewish cemetery. All right, so finding the artist. This is this fellow down here. You can kind of go on a chase for finding out more information about the community that way too. Who is the artist? What was the company? What did they do? Well, this is the fellow who was responsible for making at least one of those. I'm guessing that was probably something they offered. I'd love to find a catalog of theirs. And they had an ad in the paper. And he was also involved in the Alamo Monument to some folks who related, it's in Key West. So they had this wonderful rendering of it, more information about it in the newspaper. And this is what it looks like there. So this individual who was involved in carving and making this happen also has some pretty substantial art. And he is buried in Richmond. That's not my picture, sadly, but I'm sure there are a number of you out here who have contributed to Find a Grave. Raise your hand, please, so we can thank you. If you're not familiar with Find a Grave, it's a wonderful resource for local history and genealogy. Volunteers who go, I would say, like, beat the pavement, but it's not really pavement, and take photographs of headstones. They add obituaries, they add links to other family members. It's an incredible undertaking. So thank you, person who did this so I could illustrate it in my presentation. And then there's also history at risk. So we go to all these wonderful places that are still around, they're still preserved, they're accessible. Sometimes things are on private land. I don't go to those because I've heard lots of stories from genealogists about bumping into the landowners, even though you may have the legal right to go visit because it's your family. There are other places. This is in Cornishville, Kentucky. Has anybody been to Cornishville? You would know it existed. It's a church and 2 houses now. When I was wandering around in there, there's a church cemetery there, and I came across this little wooden plaque broken on the ground. No graves around, but can we read kind of what this says? Exactly. So there are no headstones, there's no field stones, and there's not a whole lot out there about it. And the only thing right now that I know of is this. So if you're interested in cemetery preservation history, the Kentucky Historical Society has a cemetery preservation page, and a lot of other things that they do when it comes to that. Association for Gravestone Studies, you can learn about all over the country, different cemeteries, and also have some camaraderie with other people who like to do it too. And the National Park Service has a cemetery conservation page. If you learn anything today, it should be this. Don't ever put bleach on a headstone. Please and thank you. It will eat them away. If you're interested in cleaning them, there's information about that on here. There's this cool stuff called D2 that will clean it, get rid of the green growth without causing any harm to the headstone. But there are lots of things you can do to contribute to cemetery preservation, and sometimes it's just finding out that it even exists. All right, final exam. Anybody want to guess what organization these folks might have belonged to? Again, it's a duplicate in 2 different places. That's what I'm thinking too. Why do we think that?
Chains.
Exactly, I know. It was like, oh, well, you do see sometimes the beehive and the tent in other places too, but those 3 chains, you'll see F, L, and T a lot too, so.
What is the answer?
Friendship, love, and truth. FLT is what you'll see with the 3 links.
What's the heart in the hand?
I think that's like a fellowship image. A lot of, what is that? I don't have it with me. I think that's what I've seen. I read about it before. Get that Stories in Stone book. I wish I had more of it memorized. I do not, but it's definitely in there. Or if you Google Oddfellows imagery, it should show up too.
Are those the same ones, just years later?
No, these are in two totally different places. This one was in, I think it was in Harrison County, and if I'm not mistaken, I think this one was in Georgetown. I normally put it at the bottom, and I forgot to for that one. All right, and that's me as a kid in a cemetery. So it's not a thing that I've just started doing. My hometown has 1,000 people in it. There are no parks. So my mom would take me to the cemetery and we'd paint pictures. So that's me as a nugget with my painting and a headstone that has my surname on it too. So that's pretty much it. Anybody have any questions or anything? Or if you cool cemetery you want to share about or otherwise? Yes.
On your initial map, I have a number of questions. So
Yeah.
what did the colors of the different pins represent on your map?
They are different years. So I code them by year. We'll go to the map. Yeah. Oh, well, I'm going to struggle with this because it's on my computer.
Well, that's okay. You answered the question.
Yeah, if you go to the map itself, I don't know why the link isn't working. Let's try it like that.
Now, obviously, you're not restricted to the state of Kentucky.
Oh, no, not at all. Yeah, the pen, so the yellow is my wish list, and we'll undo that so you don't have to see it. But if you'd like to see where I've gone or where I'm going to, and one of these days I'm going to hit all 120 counties. So the gray are ones I went to before I started counting. The orange ones are last year, the dark blue are this year, so on and so forth. So.
Now, did I see a cemetery in Wayne National Forest in Ohio?
In Ohio. I know I've been to one near there. Is that near,
Yeah, there's Chillicothe.
Way down.
yes, I was headed to, what is it called? What is that other kind of nature area out that way? Hocking Hills, that's it. That was on the way back from visiting Hocking Hills. And you can kind of see too, I do it out and back a lot, especially for small river towns. This orange over here was one really nice day. So you can pick, you can say, oh, I'm gonna go down 127 between here and Frankfurt and see all kinds of different family plots, spots where there used to be like maybe small, not really towns, but like groupings of houses. And then when you look on the map, you'll go, oh, it actually had a name too, and find out more about what that area used to be like, because a lot of small farming communities don't exist anymore. Any others? Yeah.
I just wanted to ask if you could like elaborate a little bit on the history that is at risk. And I know that it was like an enslaved individual's place of burial, but could you? I'm not sure if you're like really familiar with the restoration of graves. I know you brought it up, but I don't know if you do that yourself.
Well, definitely there are certain communities that are going to be more at risk than others for systemic reasons. I think there were a couple of news articles, and this is definitely, that happens all over the country too, where there are communities that don't have the same kinds of infrastructure, the same access to different kinds of wealth, what have you, so that they don't have the same kinds of headstones. The same areas are a little different, or the same areas are different. The areas where they exist might not be as well preserved. So I know that there's people who are involved in anthropology are really, really knowledgeable about the actual like preservation and tracking of where things are. I've never played with ground penetrating radar, but I would like to. So yeah, that's kind of the only thing I know about that. I'm more of a Tombstone tourist.
You aren't really familiar with like African American historical grave markers and things like that.
Well, I know that there's different areas have different ways they depict death. And one of the things that I really like about the homemade ones is you see a lot more of that in African American cemeteries. So I think at least Mr. Maddox, he is one of them. Let's see.
That is another thing I was gonna ask. Like, obviously, probably not
And that's one of those things too, like, the more you go to different cemeteries, you kind of get used to like the typology of them, I guess, or morphology of them. So a Catholic cemetery, you're only going to see a few different kinds of iconography. You're going to see crosses, you're going to see Virgin Mary, and a few others too. Protestant ones or ones that don't have any religious affiliation are definitely going to have a lot more variation. This is actually a grave of a person of color. Professor H.W. Graves, he was a professor at a school in Lexington. I don't remember the school's name. But are you familiar with Lexington Cemetery?
I'm familiar with Cave Hill, yeah.
Oh, okay. It's, Cave Hill's in Louisville, but close. It's right behind that one, so it's the African American cemetery that is right up against it. And it's interesting that we've decided, well, he can be buried on that side, but not on this side. So this is one that definitely is a person of color.
You said Cave Hill is Louisville, right? Not
Yes.
Lexington. Okay, I thought so, okay.
Oh, this is in Lexington, yeah.
Yeah.
And, let's see. Oh, this is also B.F. Howard, who is the founder of the Black Elks. That's in Linden Grove, which, wonderful, wonderful cemetery. I used to be on the board of when I lived here. It's a really great honor to do that. That's a cemetery that has people of all different races in. It wasn't restricted. And let's see. The homemade ones. This, oh, I can't think of the name of this one right now. This is another cemetery that used to have a black congregation with a church. Church isn't there anymore. And this cemetery specifically is another one of those situations where there's a great big municipal cemetery in Shelbyville with lots of people in it. It has lots of funding to be kept up really well. This cemetery, which, let's see, Calvary, is on the other side of town, not as well preserved, not as much funds, etc., and it's a minority community cemetery. Yes?
Excuse me.
Me too.
With your explorations, I mean, do you have any kind of a reference source that would tell you where cemeteries are located in each county or city?
That's one thing you learn, is that it just depends upon the county, it depends upon the state. Some groups, especially around the bicentennial, really went out there in the community and they took down, what they had on headstones, where things were located. Kenton County is really lucky that it had Shelby Myers, is that the right name? Yes, that went through and read the names off the headstones, put them down on paper. There are other areas, other counties that didn't really have the same kind of resources or the same dedicated folks, and there's a lot less out there. Or two, there's instances where there's an interesting book called Cemeteries that are like at the bottom of what is now Lake Cumberland. So if someone didn't know or didn't write that down, that would be lost too, but it really depends upon the location. And that's what's nice about those 7.5-minute maps, that they pick up information that might not still be there. If you go to a modern map today, it might not list those same spots.
What makes a cemetery weird?
I know, that's why I put it in there. It's the family name. This is one just south of Louisville. So we've got the Millers, we've got the Smiths, and we've got the Weirds. I thought that was fun. That's specifically why I put it in there. This one too, again, you can learn about extinct communities, whether they be cultural communities or physical ones. This is Garnetsville Cemetery. There used to be a town here. It's where my grandmother's actually from. And today, there is only a cemetery left because this is right next to Fort Knox. And they paid all the folks who lived in Garnetsville to move, and they expanded. So another little interesting piece of history that takes over eminent domain style of, you can still go visit people, but that's all there is now. And there's another one near it too called Rock Haven. Anything else?
What was on your map you had a cemetery south of Paducah. Do you remember what that was?
South of Paducah, there are a few.
I remember we visited a cemetery and I thought there might have been there that had this incredibly elaborate statue.
Yes, it is the procession that never moves. Yes, that is a really interesting one.
Where that was.
Yes, one of the towns that were hit by the tornado. Yeah, I know what you're talking about. It's it's all over the internet for those of us who are taphophiles. It's like, yes. Oh yeah, let's see. So we're almost there. Mayfield. Maplewood, so.
Has to be seen to be believed.
It's worth a visit, or they say in the French guidebook, oh, la visite.
Yeah, there are people, there are animals.
The whole family,
Here.
and the dead man is on the horse.
And again, it's one of those things that you might not ever visit Mayfield if it weren't for something cool to visit, like this really unique and very elaborate procession. Yeah, the strange procession that never moves, so you can get an adjective in that one too.
There are dogs in there too.
Let's
The
see.
men's dogs are in there.
Here we go.
Yeah, there's a town.
I need some help there. Yeah, there's a lot.
No? Well,
Oh, yeah.
There's let's see if we can see the plaque.
Yeah, there is a plaque in the house where he is.
Yeah, here we go. Oh, and of course it's on Atlas Obscura. If you're not familiar with that, you can find some pretty fun, interesting things to visit that way too. Let's see. They're the Woolridge monuments. Enshrined here are, can't see it quite well, Nichols, mother of Colonel Henry Woolridge, his brothers W.E. Alfred, Josiah, and John, his sisters Narcissa, Minerva, and Susan, small statues of great nieces, Maud and Minnie, his favorite hunting dogs, Towhead and Bob, a deer and a fox, along with Henry himself astride his favorite horse. So, yeah. I need to put that one in there too, because it was a pretty cool one to go see, and a little more far-flung out in the Purchase than I usually get to explore, so, yeah. Anybody have any other favorites or one they like to share, or?
Is there
Yes.
something about, like, if the person was a soldier in a war, that you would gain a certain point after you stopped by or paid a visit to their, have you heard that?
I've not heard of that before.
I forget what
Depends
it is.
if it's a veteran,
Mhm.
sometimes people will put a penny on, or, I think that
Okay.
they represent different thoughts, depending on
That's
the point.
cool. I definitely know, like, in the Jewish faith, that people leave stones, and nobody knows who Pearl Bryan is where I live now,
Oh my
so.
gosh, I do.
Yeah, I know you guys do, 100%, yeah. But you're supposed to leave a penny at Pearl Bryan's grave because she lost her head, so it's delightfully macabre.
Well, I think it's hard to find your cemetery, it's been chiseled away so many times from
It's
people
just a
who
little
visit.
thing from what I've heard now,
I think
yeah.
that's the newest one.
Yeah, it disappears. Yes.
I saw a different one in Lexington, Virginia. Inside a gated area and had the monument in there.
Mhm.
There were lemons all over the ground.
Lemons.
Yeah, this is for Stonewall Jackson. He used to suck on lemons all the time.
It's really interesting the way different communities or different types of cemeteries will allow or not allow mementos to be left, and it's really fun going to the ones where people can. I have a picture of it, but I don't think I have a picture of it in my presentation. It's really, I find, like, sweet and delightful when you visit one and someone has left someone's favorite bag of chips or other thing like that too. There's a cemetery that I went to not too long ago where somebody's like salt and vinegar lays were sitting right there. Like, that's like, oh, that's trash. No, that's really cool. I like that a lot.
I saw a gravestone out west, and it said, "Here lies Lester Moore." And
Mhm.
below that it said, "No less, no more." And I always wondered, what did the family think about Lester Moore's gravestone? But
Sometimes they have a
it
sense of
stayed with
humor.
me. That was a good 20 years ago. You just don't forget it.
Oh no. There are some online too where it's like someone will have a recipe or a Scrabble board. I like those too. Yes.
Well, I would just share something that I do every year around the week of Memorial Day, is I visit 9 or 10 cemeteries. I visit all of my relatives, all of my friends that have passed. little plastic flowers on the grave. It's an opportunity to think about the individual that's in the grave. And every year I come away with a project. If their death date's not engraved, I get it done. If they don't have a stone, I go get one for them. But my focus when I go to the cemeteries is to focus on the people that know my lives.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, there's
It's another novel way to think about a cemetery.
absolutely, and I really like that it can connect people to their community in ways you might not expect to. Well, when I worked at Covington, we had a regular who would come in and take photos. I was hoping I'd seen him here today. His name escapes me because, everybody forgot everybody's names because pandemic. But we happened to have family that came from the same county in Jackson County, Kentucky, and he found my great-great-great-grandmother's headstone, took a picture, and brought it to me at work one day. So it's just wonderful what folks who are invested in that will do. And sometimes it's even getting a headstone for someone that they're not related to, but because they served their country, or they contributed to their community significantly in ways that might not have been appreciated at the time too. So that's really neat. Yes.
Down in Kenton town, I don't know what county that is, down there, Robertson County or something.
Mm-hmm.
There's a little church down there, and there's a cemetery or a plot behind it. It's got a little fence-like thing on it. It's got a note on there, something about this guy really liked to drink, and if you think about it, pour a little whiskey on it.
Nice. Those are great.
She has the story about that. It's a relative of.
My brother-in-law's, he was gonna be originally buried in a whiskey barrel or something, and then by the time he passed, he was outgrowing the whiskey barrel.
I hope that information is preserved on Find a Grave now. So we need to contribute to the history that we know of too before it dissipates and is lost to the ether, because those stories are what people are going to hope to find when they're doing genealogy.
They put him in clothes.
I found one fairly recently that they were two collectors. It was a cemetery in Meade County, Kentucky, husband and wife. One of them had Mr. Peanut, and the other had a lunchbox, and it said that they loved to go and collect things. And so modern iconography is really different from pieces that are influenced by Roman and Greek myth, and now we have literal. This person loved UK, and you see basketballs all over the place now instead. Did someone have something? I'm sorry.
There's one like that in Jonesville Cemetery. It's a big number 3, and I thought, oh, so sad. He was 3. No, he was a Dale Earnhardt Jr. fan. Big number 3. I mean, that's all. So.
There was one that I saw not too long ago. I was approaching it. I was like, ooh, it has spider webs on it. Cool. It was Spider-Man. But and there's a really lovely one in Independence Cemetery, and it's in one of my iconography presentations. This person is someone after my own heart, and if there's someone you're related to, I adore it. It's not a huge headstone. It's fairly small, but I believe the person was a nurse, and she has a jack-o'-lantern, a little cartoon ghost, little Halloween images. I think it's the cutest, greatest thing, and I would like to know who their family is, because I'm going to go, oh, yay, a Halloween person. So, yeah. Anyone else? Anything else? Yes?
Are you familiar with Frank Duvenek's?
Absolutely. I used to live almost across the street from Mother God.
Okay.
So, yeah.
Do you know what those 4 angels on the corner
I
symbolize?
we did the cemetery tour every year when I worked for Kenton County, but I went on it that year as a civilian. And did you guys did Duvenek on that tour, right?
We did, but we talked more about his legacy rather than the iconography.
Okay.
So I'm sure we could find that answer back at the library.
Oh, okay.
It was a friend of his, I think, that designed his.
Lemon orange.
Oh, okay. I like the story too that for years, I think it was his death date or his birth date, one of the two, he and some other folks would go and have a cigar in his honor at his gravesite. It was pretty neat.
Yeah, the Duvenek boys. Yeah.
Right.
That's what they were called, yeah.
All right. Is that it? Anything else? I can talk about this all day. Sorry about my voice.